Welcome to the RD2BE podcast. Each week we sit down with a different registered dietitian nutritionist to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the dietetics profession. Our aim is to dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. I'm Carl Barnes, the registered dietitian behind the scenes of RD2BE.
And I am Jenna Warnock, the RD2BE host. Our RD guests share their stories, career paths, and advice to help students like us succeed in the profession. This episode is part of our mini-series featuring the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics, otherwise known as ACEND. We are creating this series to clear up common confusion and misconceptions about ACEND and its relation to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, as well as the Commission on Dietetic Registration. We're also in a super transformative phase of dietetics with a new master's degree requirement, dietetics application process, and ACEND also created some new Advanced Practice Doctoral Standards, where understanding these topics are crucial for pushing our profession forward. Join our conversation with Dr. Rayane AbuSabha. She's the Executive Director of ACEND, and in this series, we're going to discuss what ACEND is, their new standards, and what steps you can take to uplift and advocate for our profession with these standards. Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your host, Jenna, and we're continuing our series featuring ACEND with Rayane AbuSabha, who is the Executive Director of ACEND. And this week, we're going to be discussing the dietetics application process because, again, with dietetics being in a lot of different transformative places right now, the application process, such as like D&D match, DICAS, all of that's also being revamped. So we want to take this episode as a chance to kind of clear up some cobwebs, kind of clearly and succinctly describe what the next steps are, what it may look like if you're going to be applying in the future. And Rayane, again, thank you so much for taking the time to have multiple episodes with us dissecting all of these very complicated and very convoluted topics.
Great. Thanks, Jenna. And I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Oh, yeah, of course. And so the first question, because there's, just so much terminology in the dietetics field, what is the difference between D&D match and DICAS, and what is staying and what is going?
Yeah, that is truly a really great question. So let's start first. What's staying is DICAS. And DICAS is the online application portal that allows all the applicants who are applying to dietetics program to submit one single application to many programs that are at different universities, institutions, programs, different graduate programs, coordinated programs, or dietetic internship programs. DICAS simplifies that application process because the applicant really is submitting one single application. And then you enter all your information, you enter it all once. You may only need to submit your transcript, one set of transcript once. We know that some universities might ask you for another set, but hopefully you're only putting in one set of transcripts, one resume, writing everything once. So it truly simplifies the application process. And it also simplifies it to your faculty because the faculty is writing your letters of recommendation is only hopefully submitting one reference to all the programs that you're submitting to because it's one single reference. So then that application with DICAS gets shared, to all the programs that you have selected to apply to. And, it is really well known as the common application, but it is specifically for dietetics, and that's why it's DICAS. So it's just like graduate schools, they have their common app, and, many other professions have their common app, optometry, pharmacy, nursing, all of them. So this will be one of the common apps. D&D now, on a different hand, is what is going away. So D&D Digital is separate, completely separate from DICAS, a different company. And the role of D&D is to match the applicants to the programs. So now, or previous application cycles, when that student applies to many different dietetic internships, you prioritize the internships that are of your choice. So let's say you want one in Boston, your number one choice, then you want one in California, your second choice, one in Chicago, your third choice. You prioritize your internships. Then on the other hand, the program itself is going to prioritize the applicants that they receive. So the program is going to get, a bunch of applications, they're going to rate them, and they're going to say, well, we want those 10 students out of 40 that we want to prioritize 1, 2, 3, 4. What D&D does is it does the algorithm or the analysis to put the students' priorities and the program priorities and match them together. That's what's happening. What unfortunately ends up happening often is that the student does not get their programs of choice. So this is the difference, and D&D is what's going away.
Yeah, and I mean, just with what you're already saying, with the main drawback of that, which, kind of segues into talking about the reasons for doing away with it, it was very much a convoluted, little messy, and it caused a lot of students, having to do a second choice, third choice, or maybe even do the second match and do their non-existent fourth choice. And so it definitely sounds like switching more to just diecast that allows this, it's again student focused and things like that. But can you go more into depth and describe, because you did talk a little bit about how D&D could get a little messy, but go more towards into the purpose and goal in mind for doing away with D&D match and kind of what the vision is for the application process now?
Yeah, for sure. So, just what you said, John, the match is very confusing to students, and it's also very stressful, and it's an extra step. So some students, I know I've had a couple of students who did that. Were signing up for diecast, were thinking they were done, and then they end up never signing up for D&D, and they miss out on the entire placement piece. So really, it's an extra step, confusing. It adds costs that is not necessary cost to the students. Also, many times, the students, unfortunately, did not get matched to their internship of choice, just like you said. I have the internship at Boston was my number one internship, but I ended up going all, in my last choice which was internship number 7, and that's where I matched. But that, this is not really where I want to be. So, no matter what we told the student, make sure you only choose places you want to be. Things happen, things change. So matching, in essence, really was not student-centered. And that was a big issue for the educators and for the programs, and of course for our students. So we are finding that over time, the student applicants and the programs were starting to prefer to do other ways that are outside the match. They're doing pre-select, trying to bypass the match, which means the DI programs and the DPD programs were having this agreement to grab the students directly without going through the match, or that applicants were jumping ship. They get matched to a program that was not one that fits their need the best, and then they're finding that there's a coordinated program or a graduate program or another DI program that had space, and they're going, well, this program is cheaper. It fits what I need more. I'm gonna skip. I know they matched me to this program that I didn't want, but I'm gonna skip. Again, not student-centered. In the last match, we literally, with all these problems with that matching system, only a third of the dietetic internships filled their spots in the match. There were so many students that didn't get in, so many DIs that still had open spots. And because the match has just not been effective. I think in this day and age, the match is a little bit outdated. Only really a few professions use it, like medical doctors. Well, we know that, that's different than dietetics. But dietetics is just not fitting the dietetics situation. So the educators did the survey with students and did the survey with educators themselves, and they found that about 70% of the educators and the students are not supporting that match. And so they came to ACEND. The end up group, which is the group of educators, it voted to remove the match, and they came to ACEND and requested that we start exploring and remove the match, and that's what the ACEND board did.
Yeah, and it's definitely, progressing with the times and with the changes with how there's so many different there's so many different ways to become a dietitian now with a master's degree requirement. It's no longer bachelor's degree plus dietetic internship. It's like combined, standalone, virtual, in person, hybrid. Like there's so many different types of internships and different types of programs out there that whenever it comes to if that match was still in place, it would be even more convoluted than it already was, I'm sure. And if people are already, like, because we do want to emphasize DICAS is what's staying and D&D match, what we just discussed, is what is going away. And so students will not have to worry about D&D match anymore. But given how, we're definitely going over a lot of very complex, very systems oriented things, just if someone is listening in and they're like, okay, I'm glad that that's going away, but what do I need to worry about in the future? So if you could kind of describe what the new application process will look like, if it'll be a little bit different maybe than the previous DICAS, D&D, how it's changing from that, and if it'll be different for different programs like future education model, coordinated, standalone, just for those that are worried about what they should expect in the future.
Yeah, I mean, really great question, actually. Very good question, Jenna. And the ultimate goal that we're doing is that all the programs are going to follow the same process. And this is the process that graduate schools use in GradCAS. So most students, when they're applying to undergrad, when they're applying to grad school, they've experienced this process, and this is the process that we're trying to follow. Why all universities follow this process, most health professions follow this process, is because it is streamlined. The applicant will go into DICAS, so I'm going to describe it a little bit. And so you're going to go into DICAS and you're going to start searching for programs that you want to apply to. Each program is going to have a page or a couple of pages of information, which call, a program information sheet in DICAS. So then you can just say, like, I want to look at all the programs in the state of Pennsylvania. Then you will go in and look at the programs, read their information sheet, and learn a little bit about the programs. You might decide to go on the website, but you do have a lot of information on inside DICAS, so you don't have to be moving too much. So then you can search your programs by degree type, by program type, by location, by state, start term. You want to start fall or spring. So you have a lot of options in DICAS to search the programs you want. Once you decide on the programs that you want to apply to, so let's say you want to apply to 7 programs, you decide on these programs that fit your need, then you can go through DICAS and use one single application in DICAS. You fill out this application, then you can distribute this application to all of the dietetics programs that you want to apply to. And so this will really make things a lot more streamlined. The one thing you would note is every program will have a different application deadline. Just the way right now, when you apply to grad school, every university is going to have a different time when the application is due. You just have to notice these and make sure you apply, submit your application to that program by that time that they're due. So basically, you're uploading one set of information. Your essay, hopefully once, your resume once, your recommendations, your faculty are going to send them, and then they'll send them to the one application, and then it gets distributed. And hopefully your transcripts, you send them once. You fill in a lot of that basic information only once. You will always have specific area that the program is going to be specific to the program, but that's about 1/4 of the application, just one hopefully smaller piece that every program will want their own information that they need. But the basic application is one single application you're filling out once. It is very student-centered. When the task force, our dietetics application task force, that was trying to think of this process and develop this process, the number one thing they thought about is to be student-centered. Every question they asked was, is this going to be good for the student? If it's not, let's think of a better way. So because it's student-centered, the applicants is going to get many offers, hopefully, many offers of admission. And then it is the choice of that applicant. You're going to get, let's say, 4 offers, and you're going to look and go, which of these 4 offers is going to meet my needs the most? Which one do I want the most? Which one works for me the most? And you'll choose that one. Versus now with the match, where you just get matched and you have no choice what your place is. In this new student-centered process, you are making the choice of the program that fits you best, and then you accept that program. So, but before I finish this, I just want to give you one little detail that for this coming year, 2024, 2025, because it's such a new process, we did not want to make it a requirement for all the ACEND programs to follow DICAS. So for this one single year, you're going to find that some programs, mostly they're going to be graduate programs and coordinated programs, that probably will have you apply outside of DICAS. But after for the 2025, 2026 cycle, we're hoping that all programs will have to go through DICAS. So this would really streamline things for our students quite a bit.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And I'm glad that, it's being proposed, but given that it's new and given that the previous system had been around for so long, and given that there's so many different programs popping up now, it's good to ease into it with just that like kind of transitionary period. And this is just one follow-up question regarding the like central application, and then whenever you look at individual programs, how they may have a unique section based off of their specific needs or preferences and things like that, and with having the different deadlines. And so will it be that you fill out your primary application first, and then if they say that you're applying to one program where it's like due in December, but then you have another program where it's due in September, do you need to have your central application done by September, hit submit, and then that will like funnel to all of your programs of interest automatically?
No, great question. So usually you fill out your first you fill out the central application, and then that program that's due in September, you fill out that the piece that the program wants. Then that becomes your application to that program, and you send it into that program. You submit to each program. Then let's say your next program is due in October. Then you fill out the information for that's specific to that program in October, and then you submit, and it goes to that. You can decide when your application goes to which program by pressing that submit button.
I gotcha. Okay, yeah, and that makes sense, where it's like you start with the general application, and then once you find which programs you specifically want to apply to, then it directs you to the specific, deadline, what they're asking for outside of the general application.
Yeah, basically. I mean, every program has a sheet that you can access all the time, and you can read, and they tell you exactly when they're due, what everything, and you follow that sheet. So if I were you, I would put, let's say, if I was a student, I would put in my reminders that this application is due on this date and this application is due on this date. Then you can go in and make sure you don't miss any dates and apply for all the applications.
Yeah, definitely.
That you want. Like what I know, I'll tell you this from my kids. What they did with GradCast is they filled out the application for all the programs, got them done, and then then they when it's due, they would submit it by the time it's due, just to make sure that they're reviewing it, they're getting the time to think about it. Whereas I have another kid who just decided, and then on that first day when the first application is due, submitted all of them to everything. So I think every student might decide to do it differently. And it really is what you decide. Just don't miss the deadline. Make sure you follow the deadline.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing, is like it's definitely more student-centered, more streamlined, but what comes with the student-centered is that you won't have that like April 15th or whatever blaring in your face anymore. It'll be just putting on the only biggest thing to keep in mind is just those individualized deadlines, and that it's no longer just our version of tax day pretty much when all the applications are due. But yeah, just mainly wanted that clarification to given that there's going to be different deadlines now, how that's going to look in the back end. But you mentioned how on that program sheet, how one piece of the information that the programs may have is their like start date. And so with that, there's been that understanding in the past of like spring and fall match. And so will there still be a cycle like that, or because programs will have different start times, what will that look like?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So, it really won't be going away, but it sort of will be going away. They're not going to be fall and spring match. That idea will definitely is going to go away. But we do have guidelines to follow for fall and guidelines to follow for spring, because we want to make sure that the process is fair and equitable to students and to programs. So we just want to make sure also that our students are not sitting and waiting for a response. Let's say a program director goes on vacation, and which never happens, as you know, being a faculty is not an easy job. But let's say they go on vacation and they're gone, or for 3 or 4 months, and here you're waiting on the response and you have no response. So we have set specific deadlines to make sure that the student is hearing on time. So sort of, we didn't want the April 15 deadline, but the board did want some timeline so the students are not sitting and waiting with no guidelines and no hope. So I'm going to tell you some of the dates. So the DICAS portal is going to open on August 5 for applicants, and you can start submitting your application anytime after August 5. If you apply in the fall, and typically students are applying in the fall to start in January class, but some programs may use the fall for the next fall start date, but truly we want to encourage you apply in the fall to start in January. So let's say if you apply in the fall, the program, then you apply to this program, they start in January, they have deadline dates. They have to notify you of the offer or of either offering for you or rejecting your application by November 1st of that fall, of that year. The program also cannot force you or require you to respond and make a decision before November 15th. So let's say they're going to offer you a spot by November 1st. Let's say on October 30th, they're going to send you a letter saying, we're so happy to have you. We think you're going to match our program. You're wonderful. And they'll say, we would like you to let us know by November 15th. They cannot say by November 14 or 13. It cannot be before. They can't require you to give an answer before November 15th, because we want the student to have that time to consider what they need, what's their life like, and which program they want to accept. Again, remember, it's student-centered. So November 15, the program can give you till November 16 or November 20th, but they cannot do it before November 15. That's for the fall. Now, the spring application, you apply in the spring for a start date for the next fall. So most students apply in the spring for a fall August start date. But just be careful that if you're applying for a spring application, many programs for spring, their applications are due in November and December. And some very rarely are they due in January. So the applications are going to be due early, a little bit early, because that's how GradCast works, and that's how most university applications work. So for the spring, it's very similar to the fall application. The program has to notify you of your offer or rejection by March 1st, but they cannot force you to make a decision until March 15th. The one thing you need to note is that some students will be placed on a wait list. Some programs may decide to have a wait list, the way now many other professions do. And when you're put on a wait list, most likely you may not hear from the program if you got accepted until November 15 or until March 15. So once the program hears from all the other students, from all the ones that they gave them an offer, they might have some spots open, and then they will then can be able to, if you're on a wait list, reach out and say, we have a slot for you. Are you interested? So that is the process that happens now. And for many other health professions, and that's what dietetics is going to be adopting. So, and then to make it even more student-centered, let's say you were not on a wait list, or you didn't get through a wait list, you were not accepted when you applied in the fall, and you were not accepted when you applied in the spring, just having a really bad luck this year. But after March 16, after that spring session, after March 16, programs that have openings that are still looking for positions to fill, they will go back and re-advertise inside DICAS and will reopen their application. And you can go in, search for these programs that have open applications, and send your application again that you have already filled out once. Send it back to see to have even more chance to get in. So the chances of a student of being selected and applying are quite huge. I think I heard myself say match. I hope I didn't use that word. It's just so hard to forget about those words. But really, you're applying and you're getting accepted into a program.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's definitely, I very much understand just with all of the changes and things like that, how like the adjustment, but also it's a good adjustment. And it's also happening at many different layers. But I think a good thing that students should remember and honestly should get less anxious about is there are so many different avenues to get accepted into a program now, because if you don't get your first choice, then you might have multiple offers. So then you have, that chance to have multiple offers. And then you also have time to think about it instead of you have to call by noon the next day, or else we're going to move on to someone else. So there's less time pressure on that end. And then also, if you get waitlisted, now there's a waitlisting option. And then if you get none of those, then the day after acceptances for the students that did get the initial acceptance go through, then you have the funneling aspect of those programs that still have open spots. And so there are lots of hot points that students can still take advantage of instead of just the one and done. You either got it or you don't. And then because there's even, like this idea of second match and stuff, but we won't have to worry about that anymore because this one is a much more, like with what you said, student centered. And
Jenna, can I just add one more thing here? So I know that, for example, my daughter applied to psychology, and in psych, once that spring is done, once the wait list and the spring cycle is done, you have no choice anymore to apply. When you're applying to clinical, you're almost done to that doctorate program. So that chance ends. Whereas with dietetics, you still have the chance. Once that cycle ends, you still have that whole spring, even summer, to keep applying. As long as the programs have open applications, you're using that same application to apply to these programs. So we're really hoping that this way we can really get every student to get a program and find a dietetics program that works for them, and not be left without a program by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned the timeline as to, because that was something that also sparked up into my head, where it was like after the whether it was March or November 15th, dates after that, you have programs who still have spots to fill, go back on to DICAS for people to reapply. Something, where it's like, oh, when does that reapplication period end? Would it be the reapplication period ends depending on the programs?
You mean after that March 16? It will end by July 15. Okay. So they have that chance from March 16 all the way to July 15, because on July 15, DICAS closes. They need to update it. They need about a week or two to update it. And once that happens, it reopens August 5th. Then the student will have to reapply. And that's, I believe it's pretty much almost a new application. They might be able to transfer a few things, but it will almost be, they'll have to re-enter quite a few things in that application. But they can carry that application through the entire spring cycle all the way till July 15, and can still apply to programs through up until July 15.
Awesome. Yeah. And so definitely a much wider window to apply, which again, it's crazy with what you said about only a third, of programs were able to get all of their spots filled. And so this definitely, what it's transitioning into, will increase the opportunity for students to get accepted or into those programs, but also on the program side of it, get more students applying and getting more students in. So it definitely will be a win-win situation. And as far as, so the last question really, and typically a lot of our the podcast episodes I like to end with not necessarily a call for action, but just kind of something that the students can take away with. And so given the changes that we've talked about, what's going away, what's staying, all of the things, and how students won't have to worry about matching and it'll be a lot more student centered. Is there any specific advice you would give students that will have to experience this process in the future, and advice towards navigating it, things to keep in mind, words of encouragement, anything like that?
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. You know, I was a faculty, so my advice to students always teach yourself, educate yourself, learn as much as you can, right? Um, the biggest thing to know is that this coming year is a pilot year. Just like you said, Jenna, we're testing things. We want to take it easy. We want to see how it goes. The information is already posted on the ACEND website. So I really encourage you as a student to access the student information handout. So go to the ACEND website, to the student section. You're going to see the application process for the students, and then go in, and in that website, you'll see a student information handout. Click on it, open it up, and learn as much as you can. There's a Q&A in it. There's a process. There's deadline dates. There's a lot of explanations of what happens. There's the code of conduct and traffic rules. All of that is in that handout. Very helpful. I really encourage you to go in and learn as much as you can. Then if something you don't understand, go to your program director and ask them. Ask questions, ask clarifications. Make sure you know what it is, how does it look like, and how it's going to be for you. The big thing that from my point of view for ACEND, what I would really appreciate if our students could do is that soon the Dietetics Application Task Force is going to be adding a survey to collect feedback on the pilot. We want to get feedback on this process during the pilot year and how to enhance it. I really would encourage our students, when they're applying, to give us feedback. Give us your feedback on this pilot. What works? What doesn't work? You are so creative. Give us ideas, your creative ideas. You will see that ACEND listens, and we will consider every idea. We literally read every single comment. Your comments don't get lost. I personally read every single public comment we ever get. So we truly appreciate if you can give us your comments, give us your ideas, and let us know how it works for you. And if you like it, we would love to hear that this worked for you and how it worked for you. So as much comments as we can, we really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's just a great thing to end on, where, again, going to that student first, ACEND wouldn't be able to improve or make these positive changes if it isn't for the feedback that the students who are experiencing it can make. And I'll definitely find the link and put it in the caption as well if they want a direct link to access the info sheet that you mentioned. And yeah, thank you so much, Rayane, for talking again about another, big change happening in dietetics. And we are going to have more in the future, one about the, foreboding master's degree and doctoral standards and salaries, job negotiations. We're going to cover a lot because we want the students to be as well prepared as possible. But hopefully, if you're listening, the dietetics application process seems a little less muddy, and that we have helped direct you to ways to be more informed, or even just getting more information from this podcast. But again, we wouldn't be able to do this without Rayane. So thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you, Jenna, for having me. Really appreciate it.